Hello, and I hope you're having a wonderful day. Thank you for joining me as I share another message from God's Word. We're continuing to look through and examine the Gospel of Luke. Last week we saw the amazing authority of Jesus and his authority in his teaching and his authority in the ability to cast out demons. And that thought continues in our lesson this week, which is entitled Fevers and Demons Rebuked. So again, remember the amazing authority of Jesus. So that's why he's able to do what he's able to do. But why does he do it? And so that's what we're going to begin with. Does Jesus care? Does Jesus care? And so I want you to think about that, because I know there's been points in your life, because there have been in mine, where you're hurting, you're grieving, maybe you're in pain, and you cry out and you say, "Help me." And it seems like you don't get an answer. And the psalmist, you read through the Psalms, and David and others that wrote Psalms share from their heart those experiences when it seems like God is so far away that he just doesn't care. And so sometimes we think Jesus doesn't care. But I really want you to consider that question. Does Jesus care? Does Jesus care for the people we love? I mean, if there's someone we love that's hurting, sick, does Jesus care? Does Jesus care when we're sick and hurting? We're going to see examples of that in our lesson today in the story we read, picking up where we left off last week in the Gospel of Luke. Does Jesus care if we're spiritually oppressed? Does he care about us? Does he care when Satan is attacking, when those demons are oppressing us? Does Jesus care? And so the first point, and this is all found in Luke chapter 4. Our text today is only a few verses. In fact, it's Luke 4:38, and we're going to go down through verse 41. But we're going to go ahead and read that in the midst of the lesson. We'll just look at bits and pieces of this. So again, remember our story last week. Jesus was in Capernaum. He was in the synagogue teaching. And this was in contrast to a prior, probably the prior Sabbath day when he was in the synagogue in his hometown of Nazareth. And the people there were curious. They wondered about his message because they knew this is just the hometown boy. This is just the son of Joseph. This is just the carpenter's boy. And he said some pretty amazing things. But then he said some things that they didn't like, things that they didn't expect, didn't meet up to what they wanted from a rabbi or the Messiah. And so they drove him out of town. In fact, they even tried to kill him, take him up to the edge of a cliff and throw him off. And so he walked right away. And then now this week he's been in Capernaum. He's been teaching in the synagogue. And the people are amazed at his teaching. This idea of marveling, of the wonder, not just wondering about, but they're marveling. They're in amazement. They're in awe of his teaching. The authority, it's this authority that he's teaching with, which we saw last week wasn't like the teachers, the preachers of their day. And so then he casts out a demon, and they're amazed that he has authority even over demons. And so Jesus's authority. So now this is picking up right after the synagogue service. So he leaves And let's pick up in Luke chapter 4, verse 38. But before we do, our first point is Jesus cares. So remember the question, does Jesus care? We're going to find out in our story today, Jesus cares for those with physical ailments. Jesus cares for those with physical ailments. And so picking up in verse 38, Luke chapter 4, verse 38, it says, after leaving the synagogue that day, Jesus went to Simon's home, where he found Simon's mother-in-law very sick with a high fever. Please heal her, everyone asked. Okay, we're going to skip ahead now, but before we do, we're gonna go down and read verse 40. But before we do, I want us to pause just a second to consider this verse 38. So he's left and he goes to the home of Simon. Now, in Luke's gospel, we haven't met Simon. He's going to be introduced. We're going to meet him more fully in the next chapter. When we get to Luke chapter 5, we're going to be introduced to Simon. But the other gospel accounts indicate that there were two previous meetings between Jesus and Simon. First one's found in John chapter 1, where we have the story of Andrew going and finding, Andrew learning about Jesus from John the Baptizer. And so he follows Jesus, and then he goes and finds his brother Simon and brings him to Jesus. And Jesus, if you remember, gives him the name Peter. And so here in this instance, the second time would be from the other, Matthew and Mark, indicate that before this story that we're reading about in Luke chapter 4, that prior to this encounter in the where Jesus is at the synagogue in Capernaum and then goes to Simon's house, that he was walking down the seashore, sees Peter and Andrew fishing, and he calls them to follow him. They've already met. They've already been introduced to him as the Messiah. But now he's come and he calls them to follow. And then shortly after that, he calls James and John, the sons of Zebedee, to follow him as well. And so then this event takes place after that. So that's likely why he goes to Simon's home. And Simon's mother-in-law is very sick with a high fever. And it says, please heal her, everyone asked. So who's the everyone? Who's the everyone? Well, likely Simon. Very likely Simon's wife, who would have been this woman's daughter. Maybe Andrew, who would have, known Simon's mother-in-law. And so the people that cared about her, the people that loved her, remember that was the question, does Jesus care about the people we love? And so they ask him, please heal her. They care about her. They love her. Just like I said, let's continue on. We're going to skip a verse and start with verse 40. We'll come back to verse 39 in just a moment. But let's go down to verse 40. That same day now, as the sun went down that evening, all the villagers who had any sick people in their homes, no matter what their diseases were, brought them to Jesus. So now it's, again, remember, this is the Sabbath day, which would have begun on 6 p.m. on Friday and concludes at 6 p.m. or sundown on Saturday, the Sabbath day. So that's why the people come in the evening. They have been required to rest, and they couldn't travel. They couldn't carry, if someone was sick or unable to walk, they couldn't carry them on the Sabbath day. So they wait until the Sabbath is over, until sundown, and then they come to Simon's house and where Jesus is, so that he can heal their sick. But notice what it said. All the villagers who had any sick people in their homes. These are, again, people who they loved, people they cared about. That's why they took the effort to bring them to Jesus. And it says it didn't matter. They had all kinds of sickness, all kinds of diseases, but they brought them to Jesus. In another account, in Mark 14 and verse 14, we see Jesus' reaction to the crowds being brought for him to heal. The multitudes coming with their sick and their diseased and their handicapped, and the people that needed healing, that were hurting, that were broken. It says in Matthew 14:14, when Jesus saw a large crowd, he had compassion on them and healed their sick. This word compassion is a Greek word that means the bowels. Basically, he was stirred in his gut. It's like gut wrenching. You know, sometimes we even use that. You watch a video of starving children in some third world country, and we say that's gut wrenching. That's the idea of compassion here. The stirring of they saw this as the bowels as the seat of the emotions. And so this idea of compassion, Jesus is stirred when he sees these sick people. He has compassion on them and healed their sick. So back to Luke 4 again. Now let's look at verse 39. Remember verse 38? He's come into Simon's home, and Simon's mother-in-law is very sick with a high fever. And they've asked him, please help her, heal her. And so in verse 39, it says, standing at her bedside, he rebuked the fever, and it left her. And she got up at once and prepared a meal for them. I like the wording. He rebuked the fever. It's treating it as if he has command over it. Again, what's a rebuke? A rebuke is a command, but a rebuke usually is a command where someone's getting after, where he is telling them, you have done wrong and you need to listen to me. And so this idea here, he is rebuking this fever. He says, leave her. And what does it do? It leaves her. And so it talks about her gets up and begins serving them, waiting on them, serving a meal for them. I don't think this is an indication of that he is demanding this. I think what this is indicating is that she is completely healed, as if she had not been sick. You know, when we get sick and we recover, there's that weakness, there's that after, like, oh, I can tell I've been sick. What it's saying is she had none of this, and so she gets up and she just begins serving out of love and gratitude, makes a meal for them. And then just skip back down to the end of verse 40. We quit right, everybody in town, in the villages surrounding, are bringing their sick to Jesus after sundown on the Sabbath. So what happens? It says, no matter what their diseases were, the touch of his hand healed every one. There was no disease, there was no sickness, there was no brokenness that was too much for Jesus. He healed everyone. Everyone. Whatever the disease was, whatever blindness, deafness, people that were paralyzed, people with fevers, people with cancer. You want a cure for cancer? Jesus was the cure for cancer. He could heal every disease. Why? Because he had authority over the physical realm. In another story where he can tell the storm, peace, be still, and the storm quits. Jesus rebukes the fever and it leaves her. So Jesus rebuked the fever and it left. He has power over the physical realm. So that brings us to our second statement. So the question was, does Jesus care? We saw Jesus cares for those with physical ailments. Secondly, Jesus cares for those with spiritual ailments. Jesus cares for those with spiritual ailments. in Matthew 8 and verse 16, again, this is Matthew's account of this same event of Jesus in Simon's house and people being brought to him. And it says, that evening, many demon-possessed people were brought to Jesus. So it wasn't just people with all these diseases. It's people that are oppressed, afflicted with demons, with spiritual ailments and infirmities. They're brought to Jesus, and he cast out the evil spirits with a simple command. Again, a rebuke. He commands the demons. And he says, get out, and they get out. And then, back in Luke 4 and verse 41, it says, so all these people with all these diseases have been brought to him, and he's healed them. But also, in Luke 4:41, it continues, and demons also came out of many, crying, you are the Son of God. Remember, just like the demon he'd cast out earlier that day in the synagogue, when he said, I know who you are. Here they come out saying, you are the Son of God. And it says, but he rebuked them. Again, authority, getting after them, and rebuked them and would not allow them to speak because they knew that he was the Christ. Again, so why did he rebuke them? We know why he commanded them to come out, because he cared for these people. He cared because these demons weren't benefiting these people. These demons were causing mental illness. These demons were causing physical ailments. These demons were tormenting these people and harming these people. And so this spiritual oppression, he cares for the people. But why does he rebuke the demons and tell them not to tell people that he's the Son of God? And I think there's multiple reasons. I think one, he's going to reveal himself. He doesn't need demons. He doesn't need these fallen angels, these rebellious angels setting the agenda. And because of that, he is waiting for his time, because he knows he has a plan. God has a plan. He is going to be the sacrifice. And so if he reveals himself too soon, then this isn't going to work. And so I believe that it's not that he's trying to hide who he is. He reveals that little by little, more by action than by word. But he does declare that he is the Christ, that he is the Son of God. And so he's just telling the demons, this isn't your place to reveal who I am. And so, again, now we've seen his authority over the physical realm, and now we see his authority over the spirit realm, the spiritual realm, over these fallen angels, over these demons, over Satan. And Jesus rebuked the demons, and what did they do? They obeyed. And Jesus did this for those people. Why? Because he cared. And Jesus does the same. Jesus cares for us. Now, he's not here physically with us, but he's still working in our lives. His angels are working on our behalf. He is still working in our lives, and he still has that same authority that we were amazed at in our last lesson. He still has that same authority over the physical realm and over the spiritual realm. He's capable. He is able to help us with our needs. So our final point here, Jesus. The question was, does Jesus care? Yes, Jesus cares. Yes, he cares. But more than that, not only does he care, he cares about you. He cares about me. But Jesus, he is capable to help. He has the power. He has the authority to help us with our physical needs as well as our spiritual needs. Someone has said that godly compassion is when care and capability meet. And that's what Jesus demonstrates for us, his care and his capability to help us. I hope you experience that care of Jesus because he has that authority. God bless. Jesus cares for you. Remember that.